Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Starting a Record Label. This week we've got Corinne from Indepreneur. Indepreneur is kind of like a digital marketing, it's got a few things actually. It's got some courses that you could take yourself, which I've actually taken. And they have a team that actually you could pay to help if you actually have the money to pay for a digital marketing team. And then the third one is actually you can have group courses with them and they kind of look into what you're doing and help you out. It's like a kind of a big, I think 8 to 10 person group. So personally, the Indie Pro courses have been actually really helpful. I've actually really enjoyed those. I'm not in any way, shape, or form supported by them. I just really like what they do. And they actually have a really good podcast too called Creative Juice. So check that out. If you're new to the podcast, please do me a favor and subscribe. We have it on YouTube with the video version, and then we have on pretty much every podcasting platform. And just do me a favor and subscribe because it's really hard for podcasts to get out to the people that they're supposed to get out to. YouTube and other places have ways of suggesting content to people, but podcasts generally don't have that. So if you could go ahead and subscribe either on Apple or whatever you're listening to, that'd be awesome. So without further ado, Corinne from Indepreneur.
My name is Corrin Campbell. I am the co-founder and director of growth at Indepreneur, as well as an independent musician. And I do a lot. Fortunately, both of those roles kind of overlap, which is great. But I spend most of my time in music marketing. So whether that's social ads like Facebook and IG, or if I'm doing YouTube ads, or figuring out how to keep fans engaged, right, through email and organic channels, DMs, things like that, as well as, making sales. So I play a lot in digital tools, and I spend a lot of time nerding out on tech stack.
I've definitely started getting into that in the last probably 2 years, to where there's just so many things. And then I listen to your podcast quite often in my list of tons of podcasts. And whenever I hear a new thing in the background, I'm like, crap, what is that now? And I'll have to look it up. Oh, now I gotta understand this a little bit. So
yeah, well, it's funny because marketing technology, also known as martech, there's constantly new players in the scene who are trying to do things better than, a lot of times the most brilliant solutions are brought out of someone who couldn't do something they wanted to with something that already existed. So you see these different things pop up and you're like, all right, well, is this legit or is this another person just trying to get into the martech space, Yeah. And so it's very difficult to fight a shiny object syndrome kind of vibe because there's so many shiny things popping up all the time. So, but we're always trying to, dig into them and see, if they're worth consideration. And I think that's something that, we do it so that every other indie who's in our community doesn't have to, right? Unless they, we're not the end all be all of anything, but we can at least give some insight based on our experience and our recommendations. So, but I like doing it. I nerd out on it. I do.
No, it's nice to hear a lot of, I think there's only a couple other music related podcasts that delve into digital marketing. It's definitely something that was needed and you guys do a really good job of it. So.
Oh, well, thank you. We love it. It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. When did you start getting involved? Because obviously you were a musician beforehand.
I would love to be a magician. I was listening to the digital marketing podcast, Digital Marketers podcast, Perpetual Traffic, which is still my go-to when I want to learn about nerdy digital marketing things. And I was listening to that podcast basically from inception. I was doing digital marketing in the military when I was in that gig. And that would have been about 3.5 years ago or so. And I had to learn this stuff in a non-music way. And I realized very quickly, this totally can apply to a musician. We just have to hack it, right? And so I was actually, I got out of the Army and was a little panicked about what I was going to do because I'd just been in the military basically my entire adult life up until that point. So that comes with health benefits and a salary. And I was like, I'm good. And then I got out and I'm like, oh, crap. I'm going to have to do something with myself. So I was in a big rush and started an agency where I was essentially working on accounts just, as whoever I could find, right? So some of them were really grassroots starting bands. And then fortunately, just being in Nashville and with some of the connections I had made prior, I ended up working with some bigger artists in Nashville as well. And it was a crash course in a lot of this stuff. So I was really deep into the Perpetual Traffic podcast by the time I heard Circa on it. And he was on that podcast, and I was like, this guy's the same as me. Like, I have to find this person. Like, who is this guy? Because normally when I would talk about this stuff with, friends who are on Warped Tour or any other kind of rock bands that I would end up having toured with or worked with, their eyes glazed over. It was just, they did not understand what I was talking about. They were not interested, or maybe they were, but they just weren't passionate about it like me. And so when I heard Kyle on that podcast, I was like, I have to find this person. So then I went and looked up his company, Indepreneur, which he had started, maybe 6 to 8 months prior to that. And I was like, this is incredible. And I was actually in the process of creating a very similar training. I actually was going to call it the Indie Music Roadmap. Like, had it trademarked, had the logo, was ready to launch it. We had so many things that overlapped that I was just like, we should join forces because I don't want to compete with this guy.
Yeah.
It was partially that, but also just obviously it's so much better to find a kindred spirit, So I emailed him. And if anyone's ever emailed Kyle, they know he's not great at getting back to email. I just like bugged him. And it was probably about 4 weeks later. I was like, look, we got to talk. And he finally got back to me and was like, oh, sorry, I didn't even see this email, which he didn't. I'm sure he didn't. And we hopped on the phone, and the next thing you know, we were talking in like 8-hour chunks, just like comparing our knowledge and, talking about why this is important. And we were just so aligned. And I was like, I would really love to just like get in on the ground on this with you. And I was lucky. He was like, yeah. So I came into Indepreneur when it had existed for maybe 6 to 8 months. And, the company is really we're in our 4th year. So I was early, but I wasn't like the very beginnings of it. But I am happy that I was in as early as I was because it's now a huge part of my life. And I think, having him as a business partner has definitely made, it's really pushed me to do even more because he's the guy who does all the things. So but that's kind of how I came into it. And it's just been my life ever since.
Very cool. Well, tell everybody a little bit. I know a little bit is going to be hard, I'm sure, but like to break down like what Indepreneur does. From what I see, you got Indie Pro, which is something that you can kind of like learn yourself. And then you got NDX, which is like basically you guys helping with social media. And then Indie Founder, which is like giant classes where you can take to learn some of the stuff. And then you got Fullstack merch, right? Those are the 4? Right. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. So starting at the not the bottom level, but you know what I'm saying, the most entry level friendly is Indie Pro. And essentially Indie Pro has all of these trainings, right? So I think that we actually have a suite of about 13 trainings, and we have 2 more coming in the next 2 months. And so not only do we keep the trainings in there up to date, we add new ones all the time. We're constantly having to go back and edit those trainings because even before Indepreneur, like I would buy courses online all the time. And I was always frustrated by the price points because I was always like, you're asking independent musicians to shell out $1,000. Like, are you kidding me? And then they wouldn't even get updated when something major changed. And that was always a source of frustration for me as a musician. Like I have wasted tens of thousands of dollars on things that don't work, from PR to courses to radio campaign. I mean, I can't even tell you how much money I have just flushed down the toilet. So, when we were thinking about Indie Pro, we were looking at these individual courses because Indepreneur started with basically 3 flagship courses, which was Find fan finder method, which is essentially, running Facebook ads, right? Like, how do you learn this crazy platform? And, 3 years ago, that was a lot less discussed in the indie music industry. We also had the Ultimate Album Launch, which is kind of like our funnel-based training where now that you've got all these new people to see your video, like now how do you transfer that to sales? Because that's really what we need to keep the ads rolling. And then we had a messenger training. So we just had these 3 trainings. And, about a year after I got here, Kyle was like, look, let's diversify. There's way more things to be covered here. We want to make it accessible to people who can't just pay hundreds of dollars to buy this stuff. So that's where that's the birth of Indie Pro. I mean, it was Kyle's baby. Like it was his little mind meld that when I was able to get with him to talk about what should be in here, we developed the ones and zeros training, which is all about pixels and the ones and zeros of things.
Nice.
Optimizing the fan page. We've got stuff in there now about recurring content. We're training people about email, and the messenger marketing has been built out even more. We have a selling tickets training which isn't totally relevant at the moment.
Yeah.
But it kind of is, because I think a lot of bands are like, oh, let's go on tour, and then playing to a room of 30 to 40 people, or even less, depending on what you've developed in the area, it can really hurt your relationships with promoters. It can also just be it can break your little heart. It can be very spirit breaking. So we have a training that actually, shows not only how to book these gigs and sell tickets in a way that can be profitable, but also how do you build up these audiences in geo-specific areas. We have a Spotify training now. We have, we're just building out everything we can so that if somebody wants the Cliff Notes on digital marketing for music, they can get it. So that's $37 a month. I'm not trying to advertise, just saying that's something that we hope is accessible for most people and for most musicians, because obviously none of us are the rich kids. If we were, somebody else is probably doing our marketing for us.
Yeah.
So then at the next level is our Indie Founder course, which essentially we only have 10 to 12 students per session. So it's really meant to, it's not one-on-one coaching, but it is, it's close, because we have these classes, and what we've learned is that group sessions can actually be really helpful. I don't know if you've ever been to a songwriting round or something like that, but melding brains together again, right? And seeing people who are at a more advanced level or at a simpler level, and how they can learn from each other. That we have Indie Founder, and we have a foundations course, which is just a smattering of everything in 8 weeks. But there's also one that's concentrating on getting people on your email list, getting their contact info. And then we also have another one that's about making those first sales. So Founder is being built out a lot, and we actually have many splinters coming. And then NDX is our agency services, which we typically have. We keep a small roster because we really want to make sure that everybody that's in there is getting the attention they want. But basically it provides revenue lift. We run ads for well-established artists. We help them develop out better merch. There's a lot of things that we do at NDX to kind of help what they're already doing that's working work better. So it kind of just depends on the client. Yeah. What they need. So, but Jack is also a partner in the business, and he heads up NDX and has technicians underneath him that are helping him out. So, and then there's Fullstack Merch, which is my baby because I'm obsessed with merch. I'm obsessed with having good merch. Obviously, being in the Army, I learned a lot about logistics. So, and I've just always I'm that nerd. I love packing CDs and bubble mailers. It's just fun for me.
Yeah.
I don't know why. So we've been developing Fullstack Merch, and we have a lot of, it's a best fit for artists who have 200 or more orders a month, because that ends up being an everyday,
trip to the mailbox.
Right, exactly. Or we have international clients who, maybe they're in New Zealand. So trying to ship things to the US, they might lose some customers just because of the sheer shipping cost.
Yeah.
So we also have those people who send their merch to us, and then we dispatch it to North America for them to save them and their customers some shipping costs.
Yeah.
We're also working on like merch development. So developing not just t-shirts, but like we have one client right now who plays violin, and he's very well known for this blue violin. And we actually have a laser cutter and engraver. And so we've made little keychains that have, they're blue, and then where we engrave, it turns black. And so it's almost like a 3D keychain that is that blue and black violin. So, we produce different things like that based on, the things that the client is hoping to kind of expand, in their merch.
Yeah.
So, and that's pretty much it. I mean, our YouTube channel is kind of a thing on its own because that's Cirque's baby. Fullstack Creative on YouTube is also like a huge project. But yeah, I mean, that's the easiest categorical separation of Indepreneur right now.
Well, I love that. I like that he's doing the YouTube thing and then doing the podcast thing, because I know if you're ever getting involved with anybody that's going to help you out with the digital marketing, they're like, well, you don't have any digital marketers, or you don't have any fans or whatever on your digital marketing page. How are you going to help me get fans? And it's an obvious way to show, hey, we can do this, obviously. So
right. Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's important. There are so many, there's just so many things out there where you don't really know who the people are, right? Who are trying to sell you something. And, I can't tell you how many ads I get every day for people who are selling music stuff, especially like blow up your Spotify. Like I see like 5 of those a day. And, we are the people who will tell you can't just blow up your Spotify just because you want to.
Not a good way, though.
No, you can buy it and have it not be real. But in a real way, like, we don't really be like, oh, here's how to go viral. Like, I think there's a lot of quick trigger kind of things that are out there. So Fullstack Creative gives us the opportunity to be like, look, here's who we are. Here's a ton of background. We've had videos on here for years. Like, now you know who we are. You don't have to wonder if we're some skeevy dude who just came out of his basement and decided to try to sell you a training. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the Fullstack Creative channel is, Cirque also is just a big camera guy. He loves geeking out on lights and camera and action.
I love watching all that stuff too, like Peter McKinnon and what's the other guy? What's the the guy that looks like the kid from Up. He always gets that crap. I can't remember him.
I don't know. Kyle would know.
Cirque's talked about him before, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
Potato Jet. Potato Jet is his name.
Yeah. I've heard about him from Cirque. I'm more of a YouTube makeup girl. Like I love
my daughter
me
gets
some
into that like really big.
Yeah. I love the makeup stuff, even though it's never made me any better at applying it. But but I do love it. And then a lot of news stuff, But yeah, Cirque is definitely deep in on self-improvement, camera gear. He's definitely deep in that on YouTube.
Definitely. So like, is there a certain kind of artist that you generally see coming through? Like, say, like a solo versus band, or like rock versus pop?
Man, it is everyone at
all over
this
the place.
point. Yeah, total there's probably about 13,000 people who have, purchased something from us at some point, right? And then there are about 1,500 members who are in every month, and some leave and some come in. And, it's especially rough time for musicians right now, especially those who, were mainly living on their live gigging. So we do have a relief program that we've been, trying to keep as many people in the community if they're in a tough spot.
Yeah.
But with those, like even the founder sessions that I've been running, there'll be 10 to 12 people in it, and there will be, so many different people, so many different musicians. And I think it's been really inspiring for me to see, how this can work across channels. because we'll have a hip hop artist, and then we'll have like a metal band, and then we'll have like a trippy psychedelic, like, pop rock kind of band. And then we'll have a Christian artist and a country artist, and like they'll all be converging and talking about the same elements. And then when they disperse, it's executed in completely different ways, and for me, that's inspiring. I know that's a little selfish, but we literally have, we have people who are in their teens and trying to start, right out the gate. We have singer-songwriters who are middle-aged and have been doing this for years and just want to get smarter about how they're doing it, and everyone in between. So it really is kind of everybody. We have jazz artists, we have classical artists, we have like New Orleans soul artists. It's really just everybody. It really, even at the agency level, we've kind of got some of everybody. We have one, like we have a YouTube creator. He's not even a musician. He's doing very well. He got his gold plaque for, I think it's gold for 1 million, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it gold?
Oh, I don't know. Things have changed now. Who knows? Yeah.
So, but he hit his 1 million subscribers. And so, that's been kind of fun for us because that's different from everyone else. But we have, rock bands and hip hop artists and R&B artists, and, so yeah, it's not really one size fits all, which, again, I think it's really cool because it shows how universal being smart about digital marketing is for everybody,
Yeah. Part of my whole shtick with the stupid podcast is to kind of like, it journals what I'm doing is starting a label. So like constantly like researching bands and seeing what bands are doing, especially in say more of like the indie rock to pop punk realm. Like
nice.
There's just they don't understand much of this stuff. Like some of them do, but a lot of them, let's say, I grew up listening to East Bay punk rock, say like Green Day, early Green Day stuff, things like that. And they were very anti making money.
Yeah.
They're like very against like selling out, basically, that's a big 90s thing, don't sell out, And I think that still kind of persists today, especially if you think about digital marketing. Is that something you kind of run into sometimes? Is artists being like, I don't want to kind of sell out or get into this? Or
totally. And to that, I always ask, well, do you want to keep doing this? If you're not willing to package yourself, like, then this is going to be a hobby for you, And I think a lot of those bands, they're like, well, if I get a manager or a label, then they'll do it. And it's like, okay, what are you going to present? And, if you're starting a label, you know what I'm talking about. Like, what are you going to present to that label as, look, you have an opportunity to do more with what I already built. Labels and managers can't just lose all their money, like betting on something that's unproven. That's how labels and managers end up out of business. It's just it's not wise, and it's not typically done unless it's like a label that's owned by some independently wealthy guy who's just like, I'm just going to throw money at everything, and so it's important to build up your artistry, especially before anyone else has a chance to weigh in, right? Because in some cases, when you do start sharing the vision of your artistry with someone else, and you have no proof that the way that you would like it done is correct, it's very difficult. You have nothing to stand on to say like, no, we've been doing this and it works, So I do hear that. I'm constantly challenging it. I would say, of the bands that I toured with or whose management I've talked to, there is a very, I would say there's an objection, right? There's an objection to being like, oh, we don't want to be salesy, or we don't want to sell out. And it's like, listen, I don't want you to sell out either. But I think if you do this in a classy, smart, respectful way, it becomes a viable living for you. And I think that's the goal that you have. So you just need to do things tactically, I guess would be the word, and authentically, and that can still be done.
Yeah, it's really weird to me because you had talked about them thinking a label will come along and do this, which is something that I think died long ago. And that still kind of persists today, where they're okay with the label doing all that stuff. Like, I don't want to touch any of that dirty garbage, but like them themselves, like when they see it work, like, oh, this is what I should be doing. They're like, I don't want to do that. That seems bad. You know, business is bad unless someone else is making it for me, you know? Like,
right. Totally. And what's funny about that is, you know, my background is I spent 6 years sponsored as basically as a spokesperson for the U.S. Army. I was an active duty soldier, but at the same time, my job was 100% music for that period of time. And if anyone's ever learned what it's like to be packaged in a way that you don't like, that isn't authentic to you, I definitely understand. And, you know, it was one of those things where I would talk to my friends who are on labels, especially bigger ones, and who had big deal managers, and like they were the manager's baby act, right, of all of the acts that they dealt with. And they would feel the same way. They would feel like, this isn't real to us. Like, you know, yeah, they're doing the marketing, but also like, I don't want to be represented in this way, you know, that kind of thing. So it's never really, you know, you're never removed from the marketing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Now, whether you want to learn all of the little details about margins and, you know, product diversification and, you know, marketing things online, yeah, that might be a little different. But I think that, you know, artists need to understand that that's just part of the gig now. That's just part of what being a musician in the 21st century is. Yeah. And, you know, if you don't embrace that, then you're a hobbyist. You know, you may end up just a hobbyist, which would be a shame, because I think there's a lot of great musicians who deserve to be heard and seen, and them waiting for someone with a little boat to carry them there is really just going to be to the detriment of them doing this in the future. Yeah. Yeah, I have a giant like spreadsheet of artists that I go through, and in fact, it gets rather tedious. And so I'll be like, okay, do I think this artist, you know, just from like seeing what they've done so far, would be willing to do more than just release music on their Spotify account? You know, right. I'm my idea of a label, because I think that labels are kind of old, cranky, rusty machines. Even the newer ones that people start up, they have no idea, I feel like, that what they're doing. Right. Especially in the rest, not just the music realm, but like the rest of the realm, the video realm, anything else, definitely marketing realm. And right. So what are some other things that artists should probably be focusing on? Like, I think it's important to identify skills that you can learn yourself and do decently at, and the things that you might need to outsource. You know, for me, there's always been things I've outsourced. I've always outsourced, or I guess I didn't at the very beginning, but very quickly into my career, I started outsourcing just general mixing, engineering. I started as soon as I could pay someone to do that, I did, you know, because I'm like, this is not my talent, you know. But when it came to learning graphic design, like I basically tried to do everything at first, and then figured out what are the things that I can't do myself, you know. And I think it really depends on who you are as an artist, as a musician, just the way that you learn and the way that your mind works. You know, which components of your business, like you have to do yourself because it's too expensive. Mm-hmm. The amount that I saved myself doing my own graphic design, doing my own photography editing, doing, learning those skills, doing my own merch fulfillment, you know, I saved a lot of money doing that, which then opened those funds up for the things that I wanted to pay people for, which was like photography and mixing and, you know, having a better guitar player on the record than me. I don't claim to play guitar, but I have played guitar on past records, and it wasn't very good. You know? So now I just stick to bass, which is my primary, and I can hire a guitar player to play the riffs that I wrote and do it way better than I ever could. So, I mean, yeah, I think that it really just kind of depends on the person, but there's so many resources now, like on YouTube. If you want to learn how to edit together a trailer for your song, like that's not hard anymore. It's just so accessible. And it might take you a while, especially the first couple of times, but you'll get the hang of it. Now, should you make a full-fledged video yourself, like a music video with, all kinds of camera angles and, maybe not, but you could start with something simple, So yeah, I mean, I think that you have to kind of choose what things you learn. The thing about digital marketing is that a lot of this is 1, 2, 3 step, and until you get into a more advanced sector where it requires more pivots and more expertise, there's a lot that you can do. You can run Facebook ads and screw it up pretty badly if you don't know what you're doing. But the goal of the trainings that we have in Indie Pro is so that you learn enough to no longer be a danger to yourself.
Yeah.
And so those
in the
are
past,
the kinds
I've
of
done
things.
a lot of those. I mean, up until probably about last year, I didn't really know how to use them very much. And anyone who has ever talked to before, even people who have been signed on labels, who have been, trying to use they're like, oh, Facebook marketing doesn't work at all. We've tried doing this stuff, and then diving in a little bit more, and even I've gone through the marketing, Facebook marketing for your course, and it's just great 1 step, 1, 2, 3 step for it, and that definitely even helped me with the podcast. So I've used some of that stuff for the podcast so far, and it's super easy and it works. So
great, yeah,
it's funny
that's
that
awesome.
People would be like, no, doesn't work.
Yeah. What's funny, we have actually seen that. We've had management and labels come through, the trainings as well. We even have some people who, maybe originally came to us as musicians, but then started using what they'd learned for, guitar lessons, or they're session drummers, or we even have a couple people who sell trainings like Ableton trainings. So they're basically like, okay, how does Indepreneur set it up? All right, I'm going to copy that with my stuff.
Yeah.
Not the content, but just how we structure our membership and things like that. And then they build, Ableton training, in the same kind of little bubble that Indepreneur is built,
Yeah.
So we've definitely seen kind of a range. And that's because we have taken the context of digital marketing to try to make it accessible to those who feel like it's not accessible, right? But there are very few things. There are some nuances to advertising for music that is very different from advertising a pillow, right? Or advertising a keto snack, whatever. There is a difference, right? Music doesn't solve a problem, which is what the focus is of a lot of marketing. But at the same time, there are many things that we are doing exactly the way any agency would do for any client, that doesn't have to sway just because it's music. And I think that's really the highlight of it, is that, 99% of this stuff we did not create. This is not from our own brains. This is learned and acquired knowledge through doing standard digital marketing.
Yeah.
So there's, it takes expertise in that, but it doesn't have to shift that much. There's just a very small amount that needs to be shifted because of music. And really what that is that it's a longer process, right?
Yeah. It's not super easy, but once you get into it, it's actual digital marketing. You've just packaged it easier for someone that's a music person that has no idea what the heck they're doing. The first time I got into the Facebook dashboard, I was like, what the F is going on? I have no idea what is going on in here. There's too many things, too many drop downs, too many anything, and I had no idea. But once you guys walk through it, I was like, oh, this is simple. This is not that hard.
Yeah, you just need, and I think too is understanding the different objectives that lie in there, right? Because in Facebook, you can advertise for people to engage with your stuff, or you can have people watch for video views, or you can do it for clicks, website traffic. There's a lot of different objectives in there, and understanding the process of someone having no idea who an artist is and then becoming a fan. It's a longer process than just having them watch something or just having them click something.
Yeah.
So I think, getting people to understand that and then realize that this is something that's achievable for them that's important to us, and I think that more musicians, again, deserve to be heard and are not heard simply because everyone, like, I think it's because of American Idol. Like, when did it start? In like 2002 or something?
Gosh,
but
yes.
Everyone wants to make music. And so much of the way that you produce music now is consumer level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can do it in your closet. My first EP was recorded, like the guitars were recorded in my apartment closet.
Mm-hmm.
And I mixed it on an MBox Pro, or I had the inputs from an MBox Pro. I submixed drums prior to them even hitting the interface. Like, it sounded so bad. But I made it and I put it out on iTunes. You know what I mean? So
there's a lot of stuff that makes that sound really good today. I mean, I'm an actual producer, recording engineer. So like the last band that I worked with before coronavirus hit, we did everything at their practice space. Not that I want to do that, but like I've worked with them so far. They only had so much budget. And I'm like, I want to work with you guys, so we'll deal this. But it was a pain. But at the same time, it sounds good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it gets better and better every month, you know, when I see what, you know, because Circa will come at me with like, oh my gosh, this camera, he came to me and Jack. I'm actually going to look at our Slack channel real fast, because he was like, he said, you guys ready to never have to set your focus again? And I thought he came up with a new like productivity app. Like, that's what I was thinking he was talking about.
Like focus, like mental.
right, like mental focus, because that is what we talk about a lot of the time, you know. And he was like, the EOS R5 and R6 dropped for pre-order in 2 days. Beautiful color, world-class autofocus, literally set and forget. And I thought you meant like Shift or like another app that, you know, because we talk about both. But it, you know, it's kind of funny, like he just gets deep into that stuff. So I don't know, it's just funny how being exposed to him and the different kinds of channels that he's thinking about, you know, is like, but he talks about these camera things. He's like, there's, you know, this release is happening, and then there's these, and then this is happening, and then like this is the best audio. And you know, that's why I have this microphone, is not because I was like, I need a good microphone. He's like, you need a good microphone, and he got me the thing that everyone uses. I don't know. So yeah, but there's constantly ways to make your creative stuff better and better at a lower and lower necessary skill level, right? So, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is like, figure out the stuff that you can do, because there are great tools helping you do it, you know, to kind of subsidize where your costs are, especially as a new artist or a new band.
Mm-hmm. What's the hardest thing for artists to kind of understand when you first kind of get them in the system? Or maybe like, what's the most common thing that they need to unlearn?
Well, virality is one thing, because I think there's a lot of people who instantly are like, oh, cool, I'll just put thousands of dollars on this video and it'll go viral, right? We get a lot of questions about TikTok virality, which, I mean, who even knows how long TikTok is going to be a viable thing now, depending on what happens, you know. But I think the biggest thing that musicians need to unlearn, and actually Circa and I were talking about this the other day, and then he also went live in our Facebook group and ranted on it for like 90 minutes a couple mornings ago, but is that, you know, it's not an insult to say that musicians are not in our standard execution of what we know and are passionate about. We're not exposed to the dealings of complex business. It's not that we can't understand it. It's that we don't necessarily think about it, depending on who we are, right? There's obviously a variety. There's plenty of musicians who also have a day job and work in business, whatever. But largely, the reason we create music is not because we're thinking about business. We're expressing a creative outlet where, you know, there's a lot of different motivations in that most of them are not business focused. So when things in business pop up, we're very reactionary to them. We feel as though we need to like wrangle this in the scope of what we understand and react to it, which is where shiny object syndrome comes in, right? That's why everyone flooded to TikTok. They were like, how does this apply to us? We got to do, you know. And there was a panic about TikTok when it first, you know, started coming out. I think there still is. I think there are still musicians who are like, how do I get big on TikTok? So I think that, you know, learning that music is a business is the first major challenge. It's like, look, this is about money in, money out, right? Like, how much can you save? What can you sell things for? How do you save money? You know, if I have to have another conversation about print on demand with an indie artist, I'm going to lose my marbles because you make no money doing that. And they're like, but I don't have money to get t-shirts. So this is the only way I can sell t-shirts.
Like, make them yourself.
Like, yeah, it's
I'm actually buying a press for that, like right now, just because.
Dude, that's more sophisticated than me. Because I use like those screens that you put out in the sun.
Yeah. And
they expose, and then you just do it yourself. I mean, that's how I did it in the beginning, and I still do it for limited runs now. I mean, I have enough fans now that I don't necessarily need to do that anymore, but I still do for limited edition kind of stuff because it's a selling point that I'm doing it myself.
Well, when you bought because I remember you talking about buying the engraver or whatever, the laser etcher or whatever it was.
Glow
I was
Forge.
like, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should get like just a printer to learn how. And I had interviewed a guy who has a great YouTube channel called The Print Life, Cam Irving, and he just teaches people how to print and whatnot, and he's a printer. So I was like, dude, this is gonna be at least simple enough for you to do at the beginning to where you're not gonna lose your back. Like, dude, all those print on demand places, you're gonna get $1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so you put a lot of effort into it, and it also just isn't a great experience for your fan. It gets sent from someone else. It comes in like a white plain package. There's no note from you. Like, it's like, all right, cool, I got a shirt. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's something else that. So when musicians come in, breaking them of the idea that that they aren't a business, or that business is evil, or that business elements are like, learning about true business is that's what you are. Mm-hmm. If you're a musician, you're self-employed, you're trying to start your own business. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think breaking people of the idea that like business is bad, marketing is bad. It's like, yeah, if you want it to be a hobby, maybe it is. If you want to sell things and make a living and have something that you can viably live off of, it's a business. Yeah. I mean, wanting it to be something else is not going to achieve that for you. You know what I mean? So that's probably the biggest thing that we have to break people of, is just realizing that great music isn't going to do it. Releasing on Spotify every 2 weeks isn't going to do it, And I think it's a hard lesson for people to learn because they feel like they've already put so much into the music. They want that to be enough, but it just isn't.
I know it's like a left brain, right brain thing too, because you got the artistic side where you're creating, and then you got the other side where it's numbers and number munching or whatever. Right. And it's really hard to get over it, and I understand that. I completely 100% understand that. It's just you have to. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm lucky because my first EP I put out in 2008. I started working on it in 2006, and it just took me that long to get it done. So it was very MySpace era.
Yeah.
And at that time, tons of musicians were, getting discovered on MySpace.
One of my best friends from high school was in the White Tie Affair. He's a lead singer.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So MySpace success story, right?
Yeah.
So it's like because of that, I didn't have any preconceived idea of like how I would get that EP out or do anything with it. I had no idea. I was in the military. I was trying to, figure it all out. So I was trying to do it part-time, and I was just looking at what was happening on MySpace, and I was fortunate enough to it just cemented itself in my brain. And it's maybe because my mom was a small business owner. She owned a karate studio, which is a very different kind of business. But she would talk about, margins and, all of the things that go into running a business. And so I just immediately was like, I need to know who these people are. I need to know who's in my top 8. I would have Twitter contests and be like, who's posting the most about me? I'll follow you back. You'll be on my Twitter top 10 for the week, and so I had to manually keep track of a lot of people. So it was a data thing before I realized it was a data thing.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate that that's kind of where my career started, because it got me thinking I need to track people, even though that wasn't something we were really thinking a lot about yet. So by the time, like where Indepreneur is now and the kind of stuff we're teaching musicians now, I'm like, look, dude, you don't have to like take people's information from PayPal and put it in a spreadsheet and like try to track who they are. Like all of this stuff does it for you automatically. Like this is bonkers, you know? So to me, it's like second nature just because my career started around a time where this was starting. And so I'm lucky for that. I think I wasn't late to the game or early. It happened like right as I was coming in. And so it was just great timing. And, you know, I think that's where my perspective comes from. But it's definitely something that is, you know, I think musicians struggle with it a lot. If they can see the ways that they can take their creativity out of this logistical space and turn the things that they've learned about marketing into the fun things that are actually a result of their artistry instead of feeling like it's something separate. I think that's where I see the most success from people who interact with our company.
Very cool. So you had mentioned earlier that you actually do have labels that you work with. Is that a thing that happens quite often? Like on...
Yeah, I mean, typically, so NDX we get applications for NDX a lot, but most of the artists aren't ready. And I'm sure as you're starting a label, you know exactly what that's like. A lot of people want a quick result. They want a shortcut. They want an easy way to get somewhere. So they view indie, and they'll pay for it. That's the crazy thing. There are musicians who have a crap ton of money. Yeah. There are musicians who are like, I have all this money and I don't want to learn it. I just want someone else to do it. And we don't take them. We won't accept artists like that. And not because we hate their face or anything, but just because what NDX is going to do is not going to generate you revenue. And it is our principle. It's kind of like a moral thing for us. We do not take money from artists where we don't feel that they're in a position to have made that money back and more. Typically. Sometimes we'll make an exception, but very rarely. So because like the last thing we need to do is to be taking excess money from indies knowing that they have a pipe dream that we can't deliver. Like that just leaves everybody unhappy. And you know, us richer, I guess, but but it's not worth that. That's not the point of our company, you know?
I imagine that'll probably muddy like the name a bit too if people are coming, look, they did nothing for me, because those people are generally people that also complain.
Right. Well, those are the people who don't understand what we do in the first place. Because we don't make artists, you know? That's not what NDX does. It's not the objective of it, and it's not what's accomplished by this, you know, at all. So and they could easily like spend a month, you know, spend $37, spend 1 month in the fan finder method training, for example, and then go spend that $1,500 on ads. And that would be great for them, you know? So it's like, don't pay us, pay you, you know, in that way. So in any case, we end up working mostly, we have plenty of independent artists, but they are usually of a significant level already. Or they have management or a label that's come to us. And in those cases, you know, we try to basically protect the artists as much as we can, you know. There are situations where, you know, our hands are kind of tied on what we're able to do because of, you know, the red tape around everything. And that can be frustrating. But those end up being the artists that are more ready for NDX.
I've being a recording engineer and whatnot. Like I came out to LA in like 2008. I started as like a runner at a studio, at a well-known studio. I worked my way up, and then eventually I became freelance, and that's where I made the most money. But at the same time, I worked for quite a few people that were just like people that were subsidizing with pipe dreams, like people's pipe dreams. And these people might not care in the end. Like they might just have a lot of money. There were some people that were like, you know, super lawyers and doctors and stuff that just had tons and tons of money. And there was actually people that were really good, and they might have also had a bit of money, but they were really big on YouTube, like some younger kids especially. But they were just they wouldn't they were even one kid even got to be like a kid under a manager of, I'm not going to say the manager's name, but he was huge. Like if I said their name, you'd be like, whoa. Like he was like they were managing him, and they didn't do anything for them basically.
Right.
And the parents and whatnot were not trying to learn anything themselves. They just wanted someone else to take care of it, put money into it. And that kid, I feel like if he would have went through this class, he probably, or went through something like this similar, he would have at least been able to do a lot more. They weren't even taking, I think, t-shirt orders for themselves.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Sometimes we get clients like that at NDX, especially those that have, are well established and have been working with the team for a long time. And then we dig into different assets or, data that they send over. And we're like, how did you not gather emails and let them know that there's a new album? Like, how is that a thing? Like, how are you not uploading that audience to Facebook and advertising to them?
Why do you not have a mailing list? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
it's crazy to me. And that's a thing, And so I think that that's where there's a cool entry point for more independent labels in management, is that, we can get some fresher blood in. I mean, I always talk about this because there's definitely, like with the Army and the stuff that I did with them, I was like, okay, this is a large battleship. It takes so much time to turn because you have to get all of these people on board. And most of them are middle-aged white men. So you have to, also like deal with the fact that you're a woman and, and it just took so long for them to pivot on anything. Whereas independent artists, you can pivot whenever you want.
Yeah.
So if you are, an independent manager or an independent label, you can also pivot. And I hope that what that will do is kind of democratize this whole industry.
Yeah.
Because eventually we will outpace the majors because they can't keep up. And when they do try the things that we try, they fail at them because they go in thinking they're going to fail and then they run it poorly. And they're like, yeah, see, it did fail.
All they're looking for is an
affirmative that they were right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do you see them? So where do you see labels in the future then? I mean, do you see the labels, kind of the larger ones, crashing, or do you feel like maybe they just slowly change like the ship?
Well, I think especially the way that the US is built, like the rich stay rich, and so the major labels are always going to have power. But I think that I would like to see independent musicians have a run and go at, even if it's a lot of them taking smaller pieces, having, a more significant piece of the pot. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we can get more independent musicians to think about their stuff as a business and help them focus on how to make them profitable, it's a real possibility. Mm-hmm. Because at some point, the money talks, the numbers talk, and not Spotify numbers, but if you're living on it, Mm-hmm. And I think that those metrics will become of a different consciousness. We're looking at Spotify right now because it's one of the only things that we can track. It's one of the only things where we can look at someone else's status and know what's going on, we feel. But, if independent musicians are, driving sales and are generating revenue and making their own money, it's going to become noticeable that we have outpaced the growth rate of the major industry. And so that's what I'm hoping for. And I think that's really something that Indepreneur is, hanging our hat on, is that it's very possible. And the more people that we can reach, the faster that'll happen. I'm also, in protest of artists who get typecast, and that's something that even in my own music, which, I don't talk about a lot, but it's a little bit of a political status for me right now because I'm releasing music that is not the same music that I've released the majority of my career.
Yeah.
I'm releasing remixes and orchestral stuff where I've released rock in the past and like Warped Tour rock, angsty shit, and I'm releasing this other stuff and it's like, look, I shouldn't, fans should not expect artists to stay the same. They should not expect art to stay the same. Yeah. When we go back and we look at Van Gogh, right? His whole catalog of paintings they weren't the same. They can identify what era of Van Gogh's life it was painted in because of the diversity between his entire work, you know? And I want musicians to be able to do that as well. And as labels get less out of it and there's less fear of financial recourse issues, you know, the faster we'll be able to just be like, look, the independent music is diverse, and it's diverse within an artist, and it's also diverse across the spectrum. So get into it because it's cool, you know?
It's definitely a hard thing for bands to deal with. I even remember being younger, and whenever a band would take like a hard turn, you'd be like, what? And like eventually you might get into
like
it.
Like Hoobastank?
Yeah.
Hoobastank took a hard turn. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they took a super hard turn, and I've loved Hoobastank is probably like one of my number one favorite bands of all time, and people were so mad.
Well, it's like Sugar Ray. I mean, Sugar Ray is like a metal.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah,
and then like, oh, hold on, let me go pop. Like, or Smash Mouth or Goo Goo Dolls. Have you ever heard Goo Goo Dolls' first album? It's nothing like their hair kind of rock of after that. It's weird.
Right. It's like going from No Doubt to Gwen.
It's yeah. Well, even then though, like that took some time.
She created a new brand, you know, but there are bands that have tried to do it within themselves without doing that, and it's very difficult.
She took some time though to get from A to whatever, you know.
Yeah,
so it's kind of
for sure.
I understand that people took that a little bit better, but yeah, when you go whoo, like one way, like ooh,
exactly,
you might lose some fans.
For sure. Yeah. But also, like, what kind of society are we living in where that's the thing? Where if you skew, because how many people do you know that only listen to one style of music? This is only listen to rap. That's all I'm going to listen to.
Yeah. Since I was a punk kid, like, you got in trouble if you were listening to more than that, which is ridiculous. Right. But, you know.
Yeah, but there's a political statement that goes with punk that's a little different. You know, I think
can be.
And, you know, I think that there's culturally, even over time, that's changed, right? You know, as MTV diversified, as, you know, and moving into like where we are now, right? There's a ton of crossover between all kinds of different, I think country is the one that still kind of stands alone more than the rest. But like, Ariana Grande fans might be pop fans. They might be R&B fans. They might be rap fans. They might also listen to rock. You know, I think there are more people listening to a wider, diverse spread of music, partially because it's all just digital. You don't have to commit to it with a CD. You can go check it out. You can figure out if you like it, you know, and then put it on some weird eclectic, you know, mix playlist on Spotify, you know, listen to all of it. So I think that's a construct of the labels basically saying like, this is an artist and you know who they are. And now we're going to be able to project record sales because you know who they are and you're going to stay with them, you know? And I, you know, like one of my buddies, Levi, he's the singer of Miss May I, Levi Benton. And he's got, you know, the long metal hair, you know, he just looks straight out of the 80s. It's amazing. And he sings, you know, pretty aggressive metal music, you know. And, you know, he's definitely the type of guy who's like, all right, open it up. You know, like he's that guy. You know what I mean? And if you haven't heard Miss May I, go check him out. Definitely a great band, very hardworking band who gets it. But
I would say
you know,
some of the
he will
metal
listen
bands
to
get it
all
a little
kinds
bit.
of music that is not that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of it's silly to think that fans of music aren't different from the musicians themselves, like just inspired by all kinds of different things, you know?
Yeah. I think metal music, musicians and metal bands are one of the only kinds of rock bands that might be getting the digital industry and doing video and doing other things. They're the ones that are kind of dipping their toes into it a little bit. Maybe a little bit of like the emo rap kind of stuff that's going on now. But besides like rock in general is kind of like, I don't know why they just like, I don't want to get in the water.
Right. It's actually funny, like how many like Marshmello and Rez remixes I've seen of like Under Oath lately or A Day to Remember. And I'm just like, this is cool, but what are they doing? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I love electronic music. I love Rez. I love Marshmallow. I love Bass Nectar. Like, I'm totally into that side. And for me, it's actually, I'm pretty jazzed to see that. Or like, if you look at Poppy, right? Like, what the hell is this girl doing?
Exactly.
But it's great. It's, to me, it's ingenious. I love that it's a complete flip within a song, you know? So, so yeah, I mean, hopefully that'll just, you know, our minds will be opened, because it, you know, we aren't necessarily in the same world that we always have been. Because I do think that, like, making artists stay on a track has been largely propelled by the people who market them rather than the artists themselves. If the artists themselves want to do it that way, fine. If that's where you're comfortable, stay there.
I think it's something the fans kind of project upon them. I mean, like, if a band changes, like, they're going to be like, oh, I'm mad about it. Like, see it all the time.
Yeah, but aren't they mad about it because the labels or the major music industry have taught them to be able to expect the same thing? Like, don't you think that that could be something that we've just learned to have a preference because that's the standard of the way things have been all this time?
It could.
That's my mind. That's what I think. I would posit that, you know, we expect a certain thing because someone at some point set that expectation, not necessarily because it's better, just because that's the way it's been, you know. That there's a lot of things in our social structure that would, you know, go by the same kind of standard, which is that we expect what we expect, and anything different is bad.
Yeah. But
maybe it's not, you know. So I'll be interested to see, like, how it all shapes out, especially as so many artists have all this time to sit and work and self-reflect and whatever. I'll be interested to see if some things change up a little bit. I'd love to see that.
I definitely seen a lot more artists actually doing, like, Facebook Lives and things like that, and getting into, like, opening that door, which is nice.
Yeah. I think so too. I've actually been really surprised. You know, I follow a lot of bands on Bands in Town. That's kind of how I get my concert updates. And like Death Cab for Cutie has gone live like twice a week for weeks now. And I'm like, how, like, before this happened, how often would we really see those guys going live and just being like authentic and out there, you know? Like, it's not a normal thing. I think it also does kind of, the way it is, like, social media has already accelerated the fans' expectations of access to their favorite artists. And I think it's going to come out of this tenfold, because now artists have been trying to keep people engaged through live streaming instead of touring. But live streaming and touring are very, very different in experience, you know? So I'm interested to see, like, how fans feel about going back to going to shows and, like, not having that intimacy with that artist anymore. There might be, you know, a protest in that department.
Yeah, I mean, at least until things are slightly what people would think is safer to be out there.
Right.
They don't want to get out, you know? Like,
which, who knows what that's going to be, right? Like, gosh. Yeah, the whole thing is really bonkers. I think just processing it for any of us is just really difficult, because it's like so many of us are in a huge rush to get back to normal. Yeah. But I think no matter where you sit in that department, it's like, yeah, but when is that going to be? And there's like 15 doctors on every freaking channel telling you different things about when it's going to be. Yeah. And it's like, why don't we just say we don't know? You know
that would be beautiful.
Yeah, like that. Let's just say we don't know. Like, I don't want to be disappointed when you say, you know, August 15th and it passes. Like, I'm going to go more crazy than if I just assumed it would be never.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you got the people on one side where they're like, oh, this is going to be the worst thing on earth forever. And then the other people are going to be like, on the other side, it's like, it's nothing. Like,
yeah.
I don't think I agree with either of you.
Right. I mean, I'm an indoor kid, so this hasn't been, and Cirque is an indoor kid as well. Like, we you know what I mean? Like, we're just playing on our shit all day. So, like, I think that, you know, for some people it's probably maddening. For me, it hasn't really been. I mean, there's a couple of instances where I'm like, man, you know, like, I had tickets to see Hayley Williams at the end of June at Brooklyn Bowl when she was playing in Nashville. And it's so funny. Like, I think it was Ticket Web. I wasn't Ticketmaster, but Ticket Web sent me an email like 2 days prior. It was like, don't forget this show. And I'm like, I would love to have not forgotten that show. Thank you for reminding me,
Don't forget,
that
you can't go.
Yeah. And then they emailed me again the day of, and I was like, guys, turn off your freaking automation.
Gosh.
But yeah, so there have been a couple moments where I'm like, oh, sad face. But for the most part, like, I've been okay. I'm patient. I had some touring plans, for the release that I'm putting out right now. Those are obviously on hold, and they're European, so you might even be on a longer hold since we're not allowed to go there right now. But it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, I just have time. I have an excuse to spend more time creating. But yeah, I'm interested to see how many of us go like clinically crazy before this is over.
Yeah, my daughter, she's 13, so like you could definitely tell her that she's getting edgy, like just because of her friends not being able to see her friends or whatever. So,
right, yeah. And it's funny because like kids that age spend so much time on their devices anyway, but at the same time, like that's not enough. You would think. Right, as a young adult or a standard adult person looking at teenagers, you're like, man, they're just on their devices all the time. Mm-hmm. So you would think they'd be fine not seeing each other, but no, they're on their devices and they're seeing each other. They're just filling their head with all the things.
Well, they like do TikToks and stuff together and do all these other crazy things.
Yeah,
they still like going swimming and crap. I mean, it's not like we're all old.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I feel for it because I just know, some people are losing their brains, and I just am kind of happy that I was an indoor kid to begin with, so that it's a little easier on me.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I don't want to keep you forever. I know you got some stuff to do.
Indepreneur, it's a company. I try to do some stuff for it. They make me work. It's like,
I don't want to work. I would do fun stuff like Cirque, go find cameras and things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, mine is developing merch. Mine is like, I want to go grab a piece of acrylic and carve out some new shapes and products right now. And maybe make some leather bound journals. That's kind of that's my next one.
You get like one of those like leather presses or whatever, like to put the names and things into it.
No, like this the Glowforge will actually burn into leather.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I can do it super intricately. So you just like bind your own paper. You actually like get paper and just put the glue. It sounds really complicated, but it's not. You just, you cut it with a straight edge and put glue along it, and then just lace it into the leather. You got a leather bound journal.
Nice.
Yeah. So
I love all those DIY things to where like people don't think about them, Yeah.
I don't know. Well, the thing is, fans think about them. That's what's cool. And all our artists that we're going to be, sorry, I got back on this, but no, you got me on it. Or I got me on it. One of us got me on it and now I'm there. But anyway, whenever you can say that something is like hand bound or handmade, they assume that it's the artist that did it, Now, you wouldn't want to lie about it and say, I bound these, but if it says hand, but it allows you to not spend $1 million. I mean, we can create a leather bound journal for like, if we did it in mass, probably like $5 to $6. So if you could sell those for 20 to 35, depending on how much you put into the artwork on top. And that's a huge margin for an artist. It's great. So there are some artists where that works for their brand. It makes sense, especially if they have any kind of reference to letters or journaling or, any of that. So yeah, I mean, doing cool stuff like that, I could just nerd out on that all day long.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, I will put the Indepreneur link and whatnot in the show notes, or if this is on YouTube, it will be in the comments section. Thanks so much for coming on and spending some time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.